Yes, we really appreciate everyone getting seated, and so we can start our welcome and get the program underway. So please come on up. So I have the honor of just moderating this portion today. My name is Maria Ott, and I am a professor at USC Rossier School of Education, but more importantly, I'm a board member of the Campaign for College Opportunity, which I'm very proud of, so I welcome all of you. I just had to tell you that I feel special being here. I grew up around the corner from the university. I lived on the corner of Eastern and Lansdowne. Now there's a Lansdowne that's up here, but if you take Lansdowne all the way to where it starts, there was an apartment building there, and there was a one-bedroom apartment where my family lived when I was growing up. And my father was a barber, and he was a barber at the Metro Barber Shop on Eastern Avenue. So I have a connection here. I was the first in my family to graduate high school and attend college. And the reason I was able to go to college at all was because at that time, California had a scholarship program. And I was able to get a California State Scholarship. And that helped pay for my education. Otherwise, that wouldn't have happened at that time for me. So also, I have to tell this as our president is here, in 2002, I was actually honored in this building with a Distinguished Educator Award. So thank you, Cal State University, for that. I also, in this neighborhood, was a teacher at City Terrace Elementary School, which is not very far from here. So I have a lot of roots in the community. I have been involved with urban education. That's the work I do. And one of the great gifts for me is preparing the next generation of urban leaders. I was a superintendent in 2 different districts, but I also served 5 years as the senior deputy in LA Unified and have a lot of connection with the LA Unified community. And so today it's really important for us to hear from the candidates. It's going to be an amazing forum. It's such a special role because it's not only is it second in authority. When I was senior deputy, I was sitting behind the superintendent on the dais in LA Unified. Not only is it second in authority, but it also has such an important role in shaping higher education policy in California. That's such an important role in that, because the lieutenant governor serves as the only elected official on the governing boards of the California community colleges, the Cal State University, and the University of California system. So it's an important role, and it also chairs the California's Commission for Economic Development, and so it has a vote in that affects all of these young people who are in the room today in shaping the future through policy. So let me just do a quick grounding of our conversation in our current reality of higher education. In a document called Set Up to Succeed, Meeting California's Post-Secondary Education Attainment Goal, it was a study by Complete College America and the Campaign for College Opportunity, of which I am proud to be on the board. We focus on California's ambitious goal of 70% of working age adults attaining a post-secondary credential by 2013. What a powerful vision for our state, but we're not on track. We're not on track, and that's the thing we should be concerned about. The vision is powerful and amazing. We need 1 million additional degrees and credentials to close the gap, and we need to close that gap. Enrollment and completion continue to improve, but equity gaps persist, particularly for Black, Latinx, I used to be part of that group, and underserved students. So our greatest opportunity lies not just in success, but ensuring our students complete meaningful credentials that lead to economic mobility. California is the 4th largest economy in the world, and I know we can do this we can close the gap, we can reach the 70% goal, and today we're going to hear from candidates who will talk about the future of our state from their perspective. So let me introduce some important partners in this work. The Alliance for Candidate Engagement that you see up there behind me. I'd like to introduce our partners. These are all friends of mine from going back. Californians Together, could you stand and be recognized? And Campaign for College Opportunities, stand please and be recognized. Children Now, stand and stay standing. Early Edge, EdTrust-West, Public Advocates, Young Invincibles. Could you all stand and give a round of applause to our partners? And let me introduce our co-hosts by asking them to stand when I call them out. The Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs, please stand. Yay! And UCLA Latino Policy and Politics Institute, please stand. United LA, please stand. Alliance for a Better Community, please stand. SoCal CAN, please stand. The United Way of Greater Los Angeles, please stand. And if I've missed anyone, please let us know. We'll make sure that we acknowledge your group. I now want to introduce this amazing president that I just met for the first time, Dr. Johnson Eanes, president of Cal State UCLA University here, and she's bringing welcome remarks. First woman to lead this university. I said to her, where were you when I was going to school?
Good afternoon. On behalf of the faculty, staff, and always, most importantly, our beautiful students here at Cal State LA, welcome to our campus. I hope this is not your first time, and if it is, I hope you will come again and again. So first and foremost, let me acknowledge and thank Pat Brown Institute and the Campaign for College Opportunity for your work in making today happen. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone. I want to say that everything about every organization that is aligning in this conversation has everything to do with all of my career. Quite honestly, I feel like I'm back home again with all of my usual colleagues and friends in the room here. And I want you to know that at Cal State LA, we are #1 in upward mobility. We are anchor institution of East LA, and we educate and make sure that this city is fortified with students. But in the CSU, we educate the state. So thank you for your support. How many CSU alums do we have in this room? There we go. There we go. Thank you for that. Education is a key pathway to economic mobility for students and families. It is a transformer and a game changer, a driver of regional workforce development and community impact. And for me, all of our students on a day-to-day basis are reminders of how we can transform lives when we work together and we put education at the core. The importance of leadership that understands and invests in public higher education is of paramount importance right now. If you all don't know, there's a few people that don't believe that public higher ed is the highest important thing. That is not true. The opportunity for students and community members to hear directly from candidates is powerful. We like to be a center of civic conversation, and we are so glad that you are here. As per usual, which is really why I have these tennis shoes on, they keep me running this time of year. So May is not a month, and it's almost May. So I apologize that I won't be able to stay the whole time, but I want you to come back again and have a wonderful time here. And remember, we are LA. Thank you so much.
I am so inspired by the leadership of Cal State University, Los Angeles. So proud of it. I grew up in this neighborhood and so proud to hear from the president. Okay, let me introduce Mike Bonin, who's the Executive Director of the Pat Brown Institute. Please welcome him.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today. As Dr. Ott said, I'm Mike Bonin. I'm the Executive Director of the Pat Brown Institute. We are one floor down in this building. And if you don't know who Pat Brown is, let me just take 30 seconds to explain who he is. Pat Brown was the governor of California in the late 50s and the early 60s. He was probably the most consequential and impactful governor the state of California has ever had. He believed deeply in public service. He believed deeply in the power of government to do good. And this guy was a visionary who looked forward to build things for the future. One of the things he built, in addition to the freeway system, a water system, housing, one of the things he built was a stronger education system. He created a master plan for higher education in California, and he massively expanded the CSU system. So when he left office and founded PBI, it was very important for him that we be part of the CSU community, which is why we are here. And I think he'd be particularly stoked that we are having a forum today for candidates running for lieutenant governor. Why is the office of lieutenant governor important? I mean, it's essentially the vice president of California. How much power could they possibly have? What could they possibly do? Well, as Dr. Ott said, this is really, really important to this audience, is the lieutenant governor sits on not just the Board of Regents for the UC system, but on the Board of Trustees for the CSU system. So if you want somebody on that board who's going to fight to keep your tuition low, you want to talk to the people who are running for this office. If you want to get somebody on that board who is fighting to increase your financial aid, you want to talk to the people running for this office. If you want a candidate, someone on that board who's going to fight to keep the doors of the CSUs open, to keep the programs that you're depending on for your major to graduate on time, make sure they stay in place, you want to talk to the candidates for this office. There's another reason you might be interested in this office. Out of the last 4 governors, 2 of them have been lieutenant governor first. Now, one of them wound up getting recalled as governor, so you can ask the 2 candidates whether or not that's an instructive example or not. There's a good likelihood in the modern era that the person who's lieutenant governor is going to be a very strong candidate for governor. So I'm really glad you are here today. I know you get questions, grill them, put them on the spot, make sure that you're electing as lieutenant governor somebody who's going to fight for you, who's going to fight for this campus, and who's going to have Dr. Johnson Eanes back when she's fighting at the Board of Trustees meetings. Thanks.
Love that energy. I'm just so excited to hear the voices of students later today. But now I have the privilege of introducing Jessie Ryan, who's the president of the Campaign for College Opportunity. And I have had the privilege of serving on her board. She's an amazing leader, national leader, California leader. She knows education intimately. She was a board president on a school board, which is not an easy task. And you know, now she is doing amazing work, making sure that the policymakers are really informed of what's happening in the education, like in the real world. So, Jessie, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to get to be in space with you for this important conversation. Let me just start by asking how many of you were unaware of the role and responsibilities of a lieutenant governor? Okay. I think we have at least a third in the room. We're going to talk about why this is one of the most influential elected positions in the state of California and absolutely critical to the future of California higher education. I come to this conversation deeply passionate about the need to engage in these sorts of dialogues. I wear many titles, but many of you know that in addition to being president of the Campaign for College Opportunity, a dream job and an honor, I was a first-generation college graduate, being raised by a struggling single welfare mother who told me that my pathway out of poverty would be through a higher education. So I experienced homelessness, food insecurity, but it was public colleges and universities that altered the trajectory of my life. Today we are coming together as part of the Alliance for Candidate Engagement in Education. This work would not have been possible without so many of the incredible partners that were called out in this room. I want to again recognize EdTrust-West, who has been a tireless anchor of this effort, and the Alliance for Candidate Engagement in Education partners who were mentioned earlier, who came together and said that we needed a shared vision and agenda from early childhood education to workforce for how we were going to assert the critical role of education as one of the greatest equalizers in society and opportunities for our next governor, our next lieutenant governor, and our next superintendent of state public instruction in California. The Candidate Alliance came together and they said, with a host of issues that we could be focused on, after meeting over the course of many months, they decided on 5 core issues that we think will be germane to today's dialogue. They decided on early education rate reform. They decided on adequate and stable funding for public education. They decided on diversifying the educator workforce, higher education affordability, and finally, statewide coordination across higher ed systems. And we'll talk about why that issue matters. Thank you for being in this room today to engage in this thoughtful dialogue. We're hoping you'll walk away more informed, and I am very proud to say that over the course of this next hour and a half, we have an opportunity to ask you a handful of questions that were developed by the Alliance for Candidate Education. But in addition to that, we are going to have the chance to hear firsthand from students. For more than 22 years, the Campaign for College Opportunity has been at the forefront of unapologetic advocacy to ensure that more students would have an opportunity to access college, to walk across the stage with a degree to show for their work, and that we were centering racial equity and economic justice in the type of systemic reform meant to honor the California dream and promise. I think you'll hear those themes woven throughout today's conversation. But more importantly, the last half of this forum will allow us to hear from students their original questions, the concerns they're grappling with, their hopes for our next lieutenant governor. We hope that you will walk away today and say that this might be a position that is often overlooked, but this position is an opportunity to reimagine our public colleges and universities as we know them. An opportunity to ensure that with that vote on the Board of Governors, with that vote on the CSU trustees, with that vote on the UC Regents, we are continuing to challenge the status quo on behalf of students with a sense of urgency and an unwavering commitment to stay the course for racial equity. With that, I'm going to call up our candidates who will have an opportunity to introduce themselves. And as they're coming up to the stage, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the format that we're going to engage in over the next hour and a half. We're going to have a chance to, based upon that Alliance for Candidate Engagement in Education, ask a set of questions. We are going to also have our students come forward, share their stories, which I believe will inspire you, and ask a set of questions. And we're going to walk away from today with, I hope, a call to action for what is possible in the state of California if we center student voice and these critical issues in decision-making. I'm going to have Michael Tubbs introduce himself first, but if you'll just wait 1 second, Michael, I'd also like to call Oliver Ma to the front of the room. Let's go ahead and give both Michael Tubbs and Oliver Ma a round of applause. I wanted to let you know, unfortunately, just a few minutes ago, we received a message from David Finelli. He is stuck. Travel, unfortunately, has not worked out, and he is not able to make it back via plane to be here in time. I'm also pleased to share that while our State Treasurer Ma is traveling right now and not in the area, she has taped a statement that we will be playing at the end of the introductory remarks. Before we get into the introductory remarks, I want to let you know that each candidate will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves, after which, as we go into the Q&A, they will have 2.5 minutes timed to respond to each of the 5 critical questions that the Alliance for Candidate Engagement had crafted. And then we'll call up our students to share their stories, to insert their experiences, and to ask what I think will be very thoughtful, deep questions related to the issues. With all of that, we are asking that our candidates engage in some community norms that we believe will result in a productive conversation that will be thought-provoking and content-heavy. And those community norms that we're asking for this afternoon are supporting a welcoming environment for all audience members and participants. It's keeping the remarks concise and aligned with the program timing. It's using respectful language and avoiding personal attacks. It's respecting the time limits to ensure equal opportunity for all candidates to address questions. And above all, I want to underscore that this is a dialogue and not a debate. You often hear that as so goes California, goes the rest of the country. We're seeing a moment in time where not only is higher ed under attack, but minoritized students, immigrant students, and higher ed writ large. We want to model the kind of integrity and ability to continue to lead the way that will help the rest of the state take note and hopefully take action. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Tubbs first to introduce himself. You'll have 3 minutes.
Well, first, let me say this is the first time in my entire political career where I've been the oldest person on the stage. So it's good to see you all over, and thank you all for being here. My name is Michael Tubbs. I'm the former mayor of Stockton, California, former city council member of Stockton, California, now running to be your next lieutenant governor. And I'm running for lieutenant governor simply because in this moment, fighting Trump is necessary but not sufficient. Fighting Trump as a leader is the floor and not the ceiling. That yes, Donald Trump is bad and he's terrible, but Donald Trump isn't the cause for all of California's problems. It's not Donald Trump's fault that California is tied with Louisiana for the highest poverty rate in this country. It's not Donald Trump's fault that the average cost of attendance at the UC and CSU is 3 times more today than it was when I was born in 1990, even when you adjust for inflation. It's not Donald Trump's fault that today the cost of housing in California is 3 times what it was in 1990 when I was born today, even when we adjust for inflation. And in this moment, California deserves not politicians, but leaders with a track record and receipts of doing hard things. I was elected the same day Donald Trump was elected the first time. I spent 4 years as a mayor of a city of 320,000 people, not just fighting against Donald Trump, but fighting for you and your families. Under my leadership, we did the first guaranteed income program in this country's history that's been emulated and spread to over 80 cities across this country. Under my leadership, we reduced homicides by 40% and led the state in a decline in officer-involved shootings. Under my leadership, I raised over $20 million to create the Stockton Scholars Program. So now every single young person who graduates from a Stockton High School with at least a 2.0 GPA is guaranteed a scholarship to a trade school, to a 2-year program, or a 4-year program. When I was mayor of Stockton, we were exiting bankruptcy. When I left, we were the second most fiscally healthy city in the state, and one of the top 5 in the nation. And I share that because experience does matter. But experience isn't just about time in elected office. It's about what did you do with the office. It's not just about winning titles and being on committees and going to other crab feeds. It's about actually delivering for you and your families. And that's what I'll end with saying, part of the reason why I'm running for lieutenant governor is also the stakes are personal for me. Not only do I have 3 kids who are 6'4" and 2.5 years old, but I'm a first-generation college student myself. My father is still incarcerated. My mom was 16 when she had me. So when we talk about opportunity, when we talk about the power of higher education, when we talk about what education means for transformation, that's not something I studied at Stanford. That's not something a pollster gave me. That's something I've lived and experienced. And on all these issues, I've lived it first, studied it second, and now led, governed, and done policy to approve those things. And looking forward to doing that as your next lieutenant governor.
Thank you, Michael. Oliver?
I'm a big fan of Michael Tubbs, so if you are looking for drama today, you might be disappointed. So my name is Oliver. I use the he series. I am an immigrant, a civil rights lawyer, and a candidate for California Lieutenant Governor. My family moved to the US, and myself included, moved to the US when I was 7. And growing up, my parents did not speak English, and so I was the one advocating for them. I was the one filling out forms and making phone calls and helping my family navigate the system that we have. And to keep on fighting for my family, I went to college, I went to law school, and then I came to the ACLU of Southern California to work as a civil rights lawyer, focused specifically on defending immigrant families. In a lot of ways, that was my dream job. I got to work on so many of the issues that my family faced growing up. But last year, when Trump took office, as you can probably guess, a lot of things changed. The very first immigration raid in the entire country was in Bakersfield, where I work. Border Patrol came through and they rounded up hundreds of farm workers. And at the ACLU, we sue and we actually win. My team and I last year in April won an injunction in federal court ordering the Trump administration to stop with further immigration raids. And in July, we won a similar order protecting Los Angeles from further immigration raids. But what was very noticeable to me was the Trump administration didn't care. They kept the raids going, and for them, an order from a judge was like a sheet of paper. And that really showed me that the courts cannot be depended on to protect our people, and California has to be the one that steps up. The Lieutenant Governor is president of the state Senate, where I would be able to co-sponsor legislation. And I want to fight to defend our immigrant students and our immigrant families. This includes shutting down these for-profit ICE prisons. This includes holding ICE thugs accountable when they're doing things like shooting moms and nurses. And this includes funding our volunteer rapid response networks that are protecting immigrants all across the state. The Lieutenant Governor also chairs our State Commission on Economic Development. That's where I want to fight for housing justice. I did 2 years of eviction defense, representing families, organizing tenant unions, organizing rent strikes. And then lastly, the Lieutenant Governor has a significant role to play in our higher education system. That's where I want to fight to make our housing more affordable. I want to fight to make our public universities tuition-free and divest our universities from genocide and apartheid in Palestine. Because our tax dollars are much better used investing in kids here instead of bombing children abroad. I'm excited to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers, who represent 50,000 workers on our UC campuses. And recently we got the endorsement of the California DSA. You might have heard of another Democratic socialist who won as mayor of New York City, and we're hoping to do the same in California and create a California where immigrants are safe and where our state is affordable. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Oliver. Thank you, Michael and Oliver, for sharing your personal experience and your commitment to this role. We're going to start with a question related to coordination or the lack thereof, in our public colleges and universities in California. So California has unfortunately had the dubious title of being one of, or the only state in the nation that has not had a coordinating system or entity, K-12 in higher education. What that has meant is a fragmented system that's often incoherent and not student-centered or aligned. So here's the question. California is now beginning to build a single statewide entity that brings together the state's education and higher education systems, as well as the workforce systems to strategize, plan, and coordinate actions. With the recent state funding to support this effort, and in your role as Lieutenant Governor across the CSU, UC, and Community College trustee and governing boards, what priorities would you set for a new coordinating body in its first few years? We're going to start with Michael.
I'm sorry, how long are responses? 3 minutes?
Oh, you have 2.5 minutes for each of these responses. Thanks for clarifying.
Can you repeat the last?
Yes.
Let me make sure I answer your question. So
What priorities would you set for a new coordinating body in California in its first few years?
Yeah, well, the elephant in the room is the fact that we know we're in a time of massive transformation in education and the workforce. So any coordination has to be serious about the future of education and of work, and what does that look like in California? Putting students and workers at the center. So that coordinating body has to be focused on AI, and how is it leveraged, and how is it used, how are harms mitigated, how are we making sure that students have access, that we're still allowing folks to learn the critical thinking skills, and how are we really ensuring that the value proposition of the university system is one that leads to an actual job, that leads to some financial stability, that leads to real economic mobility, that leads to allowing folks to use their brains and use their talents and use all the things they spend time from pre-K to college to actually do something that allows them to make money for themselves and their family. I think number two, in addition to that, what needs to happen is that we have to update the master plan for higher education. A council member talked about how Pat Brown did that in 1960. Do you know it has not been an overhaul or really update since 1960? It is now 2026, and Pat Brown's brilliant, but he's not clairvoyant. And there's a bunch of stuff happening now in our economy, in our world, and how folks are consuming information that demand that master plan is changed in concert with the conversations with the workforce partners, with conversations with K-12 partners, with conversations with early education partners. And then lastly, I think the coordinating body has to be laser focused on shoring up our job trainings for the jobs we know are going to be in demand. Jobs in the care economy, teaching, early education, elder care, the things we know we're going to need a workforce of folks who are trained and skilled and able to ensure that our young people have access to the best teachers in the country, to make sure that our elders have access to the best care as they age out, and for nurses as well, to make sure all of us have access to the best health care. So that will be the top 2 or 3 priorities for that body, but again, it has to be done in conjunction with updating the master plan for higher education. And I'll end seriously this time with saying, and also a conversation about how do you make sure that higher education is included in discussions about revenue raising, because the fact that there's not sort of a stable line item in the state budget for higher education is absolutely ridiculous. And that big part of that coordinating body is ensuring when we talk about education, it's not just K-12, but we're also talking about higher education and ensuring that's funded as well.
Thank you. Oliver?
So for 10 years, I ran a nonprofit organization that trains Asian youth to fight for racial justice. And in those 10 years, I've mentored probably over 1,000 young people. And when going through our higher education system, one problem that always stands out to me when it comes to coordination is how difficult it is for classes you take at one of our public education systems to then get transferred to another. I've spoken to countless kids who went to our community colleges or trying to transfer to a different university, and the classes they took in our California community colleges don't fit into the requirements for other universities. The same thing goes for the CSUs, the same thing goes for our UCs. And it doesn't make sense because it's all part of the same California higher education system, And yet people can take math at one school and then that doesn't fit into the math prerequisites at another school. So that's a top priority for me on these boards. But even more importantly, I think, is there's something very strange about our public education system, right? Which is, for example, this that I just talked about, but also that when the Trump administration is cracking down on our universities and trying to attack our international students, trying to attack students speaking out for Palestine, our schools, instead of defending these students, are turning them over to the Trump administration. And the reason that is happening is because these Board of Regents are not made up of educators. The UC Board of Regents, for example, the percent of the board who are educators is just 2%, which is less than fossil fuel executives, prison company executives, agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. It is that because these boards are overwhelmingly filled with the big donors to our political class. And that is why they are not meeting the needs of California students. And so one goal I really want to bring as one of the few elected officials onto our higher education boards is to bring the values that make our higher education system work for the people who actually inhabit these systems. The faculty, the students, the janitors, the people who build these systems should be getting the benefits of our systems, not the donors to our political class. And so that's why I'm fighting for free speech on campus. That's why I'm fighting for affordability. And that's why I'm fighting for housing and free tuition and all these other important things.
Thank you, Oliver. We're going to switch next to preparation, academic preparation. You know, we often talk about education as key to leveling the playing field. The second question is related specifically to that. State K-12 math and reading test results show that schools continue to struggle to support all students on their path to academic success. If elected Lieutenant Governor, how would you use your role on the governing boards of California public college systems to close completion gaps across student groups, in particular by race and ethnicity, and to ensure more equitable outcomes across the systems? And we'll switch up the order this time. Let's start with Oliver.
So I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, and I lived in an attic. To get to my attic, I had to climb a ladder every day. And every time the city of Berkeley's public health inspector came through, we would get a text from the landlord ahead of time telling all of us to pull up our ladders, because people were not supposed to be living in attics. And in fact, our students should not be living in attics. Our students should not be living out of their cars. Many of us worked in college. We know people who work multiple jobs in college. And when students are living in attics, when they're forced to work multiple jobs, when they're living out of their cars, then they are not able to do as well. And that's where a lot of these gaps occur. And so for me, the absolute essential part is making housing affordable and making tuition affordable for students. And I think those are going to come up a little bit later. So I'll talk in more detail about the policies I want to champion, how we're going to pay for these things. But I think what's also really important to address is that a lot of these gaps happen before the higher education level. A lot of these gaps happen before college. In my career, I've had the honor to work with a lot of incarcerated folks. And I think about, you know, some of my clients who got involved in gang violence when they were 15, when they were 16. And that's because our education system as a whole is inequitable. And so as much as there's a lot that I want to do on our higher education board of regents and board of governors, but there's also so much we need to do, from starting from pre-K all the way up to college. I think I have a little more time, so maybe I'll go a little bit into some of my housing policies. So our UCs have $32 billion invested in companies that profit from genocide and apartheid. And this is their own numbers. This is not a number that I'm coming up with. $32 billion. And that is enough money to provide affordable student housing to every single public university student in the state of California. Every single one. And instead, we are investing it into these companies that are bombing children in Palestine, that are bombing children in Iran. And these companies are now training ICE and helping in the brutalization of our immigrant families. And so my team and I put out a proposal last week to divest our universities from companies that profit from genocide, apartheid, and ICE, and invest it instead into affordable student housing.
Thank you, Oliver. Michael?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, so I'm just going to repeat the last piece. If elected Lieutenant Governor, how would you use your role to close completion gaps across student groups, in particular by race and ethnicity, and ensure more equitable outcomes?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing is, as was mentioned, we know by data that 50% of all students at our CSU, UC, community college campuses are housing insecure, and that 60% are hungry. And we know that when you're hungry or sleeping in attics, it's very hard to focus on the task at hand, which is the education. So as Lieutenant Governor, priority number one is making sure we build the housing that students need and deserve. And the CSU, UC, community college systems can do that because they own a lot of land, because they can build by right. As we talk about the revenue issues these systems are facing, you can also do things like the Arizona state system has done, and do land use lease agreements where you are able to build the housing for your students and then bring revenue to your campus to pay for financial aid, to pay for the support services that folks need. And that's why I've been endorsed by all the major housing groups in the state, because I'm really laser focused on the fact that students should not be sleeping in attics or sleeping in floors or sleeping in their cars, that students deserve access to housing to get their education. And then I think the UC, CSU, community college system is also a treasure trove of data in terms of where are the gaps, in terms of what's missing, in terms of what's not happening in a pre-K through 12 system. So I think instead of letting data sit there, is using the elected position to coordinate and to make sure that folks understand where are the weaknesses, where are the gaps, and what can we do to address those. I think the work you all are doing in terms of ending remedial education is important, and that'd be something I would champion and support as your next Lieutenant Governor. And then overall, we know that California, as I mentioned previously, leads the nation in poverty. It's the most expensive state to live. So whether you're in college, whether you're in preschool, whether you're in first grade, whether you're in sixth grade, if you're hungry, if your basic needs aren't met, you're not going to do well in school. And that's why as Lieutenant Governor, I'll continue my advocacy and work about ending poverty, about doing what we can to establish an income floor for everyone in California, because there's no sense in being the fourth largest economy in the world when most of the population can access it. There's no use in being the fourth largest economy in the world where 1/3 of all the country's homeless people call your state home. And there's much more work we have to do to make California a state that's truly golden for all. So what we're seeing in terms of educational outcomes are really just symptoms of an investment strategy that's been broken, of a policy system that hasn't worked. And a big part of Lieutenant Governor is not being afraid to speak the truth and force us to invest in all communities and ensure that everyone has a fighting chance to not just do math and science and read, but to reach their full potential.
Thank you, Michael. So our next question really centers around this idea that representation matters. We did a similar forum with then Governor-elect Gavin Newsom, and we were talking about some of the challenges related to ensuring that educators and faculty reflected the diversity of the state. Governor Newsom said, "You cannot be what you cannot see." This third question, California faces a teacher shortage, and many educators do not reflect the diversity or the language needs of our students. Since the CSU system prepares nearly half of the state's teachers, how would you, as Lieutenant Governor, use your role to strengthen the teacher pipeline from recruitment to retention across early learning and K-12? And we'll go ahead and start with, we started with Oliver last time, so we'll start with Michael.
Happy to. So there's pockets of innovation throughout the system in terms of preparing the next generation of teachers. I was reading this morning about CSU Bakersfield and the work they're doing to ensure that teachers of color, particularly Black males, are recruited in the pipeline. So a big part of Lieutenant Governor isn't necessarily doing something new all the time, but it's identifying what's working throughout the system and scaling it and making it a model for the whole system to follow. And number two, we know that a big part of teacher retention and recruitment is that teachers have to live in a very expensive state, in the expensive state of California. If they're taking thousands and thousands of dollars in debt to make $40,000 a year as a first-year teacher, the value proposition is off. So as Lieutenant Governor on the UC, CSU Community College Board of Regents, I'll be a big champion as we figure out how to make it move to tuition free, that we start with folks who want to be teachers, that we start with folks who want to serve our young people, that when we think about when we think about housing and leveraging the land, that we build housing for folks in workforce shortage majors like teachers as we scale up. And then lastly, I think the Lieutenant Governor also has to be a big and vocal champion in the legislature about the need to fund our public system of higher education. Again, as I mentioned, the fact that the higher education system, the best public higher education system in the world, doesn't have a guaranteed funding stream, that number could change every year, is absolutely ridiculous. And no, money does not grow on trees, but it does get passed through a budget. So as we talk about raising revenue for all the things we have to do as a state, public higher education has to be part of that discussion. It has to be, as we talk about Prop 55 extensions, all other things we need to do. And then lastly, I think as Lieutenant Governor, a big part of it is kind of broadening the scope of the job and making sure we understand that yes, the CSU has a role to play. Yes, the UC system has a role to play. Yes, the community college has a role to play, but we have to link arms with our K-12 partners and provide early pathways or entry points or partnerships for folks who, for their reason, they're sophomore, freshman year in high school, just know they want to teach bad kids like themselves, but know that they want to teach and make it seamless and easy for them to get their degree in 2 years. They can go through their apprenticeship and training programs and et cetera. So it's a big need, it's a huge priority, and it's something that we have to do. But again, it starts with scaling what works. It starts with ensuring that folks who want to pursue that degree can afford to be teachers, and it starts with having an advocate who's unafraid to talk about the need to invest in the CSU UC community college system. That's an investment in the future for all of us.
Thank you, Michael. Oliver?
So I grew up in our public education system not speaking English, and I also had a learning disability. And so I actually did not get my first passing grade until I was a sophomore in high school, which I understand doesn't give you a lot of faith in our legal profession. But what I realized going through our public education system is when we have some amazing teachers. I've had amazing teachers who have really made sure that I can keep up, even though I didn't really speak English, that I can keep up despite my disability. And these are amazing teachers who do way more than they're being paid for. They are paying for things out of their own pockets. They are working for much less pay than they deserve. And what I've realized is as my classroom sizes got bigger and bigger as I got into high school, it became easier and easier to be left behind. Because a teacher can make sure everyone can stay focused and stay up to date when there's a classroom size of 20 or 25. But when you get to 30, when you get to 35, when you get to 40, that's when the kids start getting left behind. And so we already have amazing teachers in our program, but we need to make sure they're being paid fairly for the work that they are doing. And we need to make sure that we hire and create more teaching jobs so teachers aren't teaching classes of 40 kids and letting the most vulnerable kids in our state get left behind. There's no reason why our cops, our ICE thugs, are getting 50,000 signing on bonuses, but teachers are not getting paid adequately. Teachers are paying for school supplies out of their pockets. And so funding the right things with our state resources, that's number one for me. It's also very important, I think, to defend our unions. I am the grievance officer for my union, and I've seen over time how my union comes together to advocate for workplace safety, comes together to fight against workplace surveillance, comes together to fight against discrimination at the workplace, to enforce our collective bargaining agreement. These unions are so critical for building our working people and for building our power at work, and making sure there's retention, making sure we have a dignified life at work. And so supporting our teachers' unions and making sure that they get the CBAs that they deserve, that's also very important. And then lastly, I support universal pre-K. I think that is a great way for teachers first entering into the job market to get experience, to do something that's really important, and then to gradually move on to high school or other kind of teaching jobs.
Thank you, Oliver. So we are going to continue this conversation related to education financing. And again, probably one of the most critical issues that we are encountering right now, especially knowing that we have a projected shortfall over the next few years. makes the role even more challenging. Question 4 is more than a decade after the Local Control Funding Formula, LCFF, reshaped school funding and brought some gains. Challenges remain, with many Californians still seeing schools as underfunded. The student-centered funding formula for California community colleges was later introduced to improve equity, but progress has slowed. Here's the question. If elected Lieutenant Governor, how would you use your role to ensure that TK-12 schools and community colleges have the funding they need to provide a high-quality education for all students? And we'll start this time with Oliver.
Yes, so the perception is accurate. We are underfunding our public education system, from K through 12 to our community colleges and to our other university systems as well. And what I think is really important to remember is it was not always this way. We had better funding. For 100 years, our UCs were tuition free. And that changed in the 1970s with Proposition 13. Who here is familiar with Proposition 13? Just a quick raise of hand. Okay, very nice. So I'll put on my lawyer cap for folks who are not familiar. Proposition 13 was passed in the 70s. And what it does is it caps how much your property taxes can go up by, even though your property value might be going up by much faster. I think that's good law. You know, my grandma who's living on a fixed income, her property taxes shouldn't be going up every year because I don't want her to be kicked out of her home. But Proposition 13 should not be applying to corporations, because these landlords, corporate landlords who own thousands of homes in California, massive corporate landlords like Disneyland, they never have to sell. And so they are still paying the property taxes of the 1970s. And so what we have as a result is regular people are paying their fair share into our public education system, and these corporate landlords are paying 20%, 30% what everybody else is paying. And as the decades went on, from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s, as these corporate landlords started paying less and less and less, our public education system became more and more underfunded, and tuition as a result went up more and more and more. And so a really easy way we have to fix this funding cliff, make sure our public institutions are being adequately funded, is to exempt corporate landlords from Proposition 13, so they are paying their fair share. They're paying what everybody else is paying, and that we can adequately fund K through 12 and tuition for universities.
Thank you, Oliver. Michael?
Let's see, how quickly can I get to this answer? Yes, support Prop 55 extension, which is a tax on millionaires and those above to fund our public school system. In 2020, I was the first mayor in this state to endorse what Oliver just talked about. It's called split roll. It was a Prop 13 reform, and we'd be happy to champion, campaign, be on flyers, get yelled at in support of that, because it's important. We have to raise revenue, and we have to invest in the future, particularly knowing that the future of California is going to be browner than its past, and ensuring that the children of immigrants and others have access to a California dream that those before them had as well. So that's my answer. I have 2 minutes left, so I'll spare you some time and give it back to you.
These are a long time for you to have to find things to talk about.
Especially for yes questions, I'm like, yeah, that's funny.
Well, this is the last question before we open it up to our students, and then the questions will only get tougher. This question is related to the value proposition of college. Many Californians believe the quality of public education has declined in recent years, citing concerns like lower test scores, pandemic learning loss, teacher shortages, school safety, and the public narrative that has led to the questioning of the value of a college degree. How do you interpret this perception? And if elected Lieutenant Governor, what is your plan to restore public confidence in the value of higher education? And we will start with Michael this time.
Okay. This is going to take a little bit longer, so I appreciate the question. And First, I do think we have to level set, right? Like, I'm so blessed to be able to have a bachelor's or master's degree. I think everyone should have access to the opportunity, should have a real choice for the opportunity. But I also think in the conversation of higher education, we also have to elevate the trades and vocation and so certifications. That's saying that they give folks options. Because what I hate that seems to be happening now, particularly in this age of technological innovation, is that folks are saying, my kids will go to college, but your kids are not. Or no kids should go to college, and that's not true. So I think the value prop for higher education has to be made clear in terms of it's about providing options, access, and opportunities so that 18, 19, 20-year-olds can make an educated choice about which pathway to a career makes the most sense for them and what they want to do. Number two, we live in the age of our brains are constantly being assaulted by information and algorithms. I think as we talk about higher education, we have to talk about the importance of critical thinking. That college, yes, should lead to a job, but should also lead to folks being able to think critically and figure out what's fake news and what's not. To be able to question what democracy is and should be. To be able to have the ability to critique and think and be creative and to meet people who are different from them. And I think we have to do a better job explaining that as a benefit to college in addition to workforce and employment gains. And then lastly, I think we have to be true to the value proposition, and we have to make college more affordable. I don't think anything is worth being $100,000 in debt for, frankly, or $200,000 in debt for, frankly. I think we have to, knowing these benefits of college, we have to fight every day to make it affordable for people. And that's a function of housing, ensuring that students are able to find housing that they can afford. That's a function of, as we move to tuition free, let's start by just freezing tuition rate increases. The fact that tuition is rising 5% every year is unacceptable, and it makes no sense. And there's no value proposition for that. When we think about ensuring that our college, that the majors with shortages, that have workforce need, that are beefing those up, so that folks are able to get into nursing programs. And folks are able to get into engineering programs or the pre-med programs and make sure there's access to the classes where there's demand has to also be part of the value proposition. And then lastly, as a state, we have to do a job on the front end of making sure that all students have at least an opportunity, have a shot, have a chance to go to a 4-year or 2-year university in California. And then once they graduate, can afford to live here and use all that talent and intellect to make our state better.
Thank you, Michael.
So there definitely is a perception that our education system is not doing as well as it was. And my response to that is, yeah, feed into the cynicism, because what you're seeing in that perception is very accurate. And I know I promised no drama, but I guess there is a little drama. Right on there's no reason why just 2% of our UC Board of Regents for the entirety of California history is made up of educators. There's no reason why on a board that big, there's only one student rep on that board. There's no reason why we have so much more fossil fuel executives and for-profit prison executives and all of these donors to our political class on our Board of Regents. These people are not on these positions, on these boards, to serve the interests of our education system. They're doing it for their self-interested reasons. And so, for our education system as a whole, I think we really need to pivot. For a year, I worked on education equity at the ACLU of Southern California, and we ran student surveys. And we found that more California students, high school students, go to a high school with a cop on campus than go to a high school with a librarian, a nurse, or a counselor. And if you ask students, would they rather have a cop on campus or a librarian, a nurse, and a counselor, students will pick the second option. And actually, when you ask students of color, do cops on campus make you feel more safe or less safe? 80% of students of color say they feel less safe. And we collected stories of 5th graders being put into handcuffs, of students being shoved against walls. That is not where our school resources, our public university resources should be headed. What I want to fight for, and what many other people in our state are fighting for, is a California that serves the working people who build build this state, to make sure that our state resources are being put into our students, making sure tuition is free, tuition is affordable, instead of funding ICE and funding genocide in Palestine. To make sure housing is affordable for students so that students are not living in the attic or out of their cars. To make sure that our free speech, our students speaking up against ICE, against these horrible systems, are protected instead of having their names handed over to the Trump administration. There's a value shift that needs to happen at the leadership of these programs, and that's part of what my team is fighting for. We need to build a California where students can see the effect, they can see affordable housing, they can see a quality public education system, and they can see free speech on campus.
Thank you, Oliver. Michael?
Again?
Oh, sorry.
I'll go again.
No, we already got you. Thank you. We're going to the student portion now, and really excited about this opportunity for our students who are representing a wide variety of backgrounds to ask questions of our candidates. I just want to acknowledge, as we call them forward, that it takes a great deal of courage in this environment when we're seeing so many students be targeted because of the identities they hold, to come forward to share those identities and those experiences, and to use that as a tool for social justice and change. So with that, I have the great pleasure of calling our first student to the front of the stage to ask a question. That is Ayude Diaz, who is a graduating senior at LA County High School for the Arts, a tuition-free public charter on the California State University campus. She is a classical musician, and she is already on a path to either USC, UCLA, or the Boston Conservatory. She's been accepted to all, but I love this. She's keeping her options open.
Wow, it's actually on. Okay, hi. So I'd like to start off with saying that I'm a first generation Mexican. That means that I was told from a very young age to work very hard to get into college. Because I was told, if you do not work hard, we do not have the money to pay for it. You simply will not go and you will work. Like my parents and most California parents, they want their child to attend a four-year college. But many are concerned about affordability. I was told that in middle school. I knew from an early age I would have to work very hard. And sadly, I would have to do that alone. While tuition may be covered for some students, hidden costs remain very high. If elected Lieutenant Governor, how do you ensure financial aid reflects the true and total cost of attending college? Thank you.
We're going to start with Oliver.
Yes, so I think we'll address that by making our public education systems, community college, CSUs, and UCs tuition-free. And doing that by returning to what they used to be, which was for 100 years, they were completely tuition-free until Proposition 13, until these corporate landlords stopped paying their fair share. But as you said, there is so much more costs to college than just your tuition, right? From textbooks to food to tuition, all of these things. And nothing grinds my gear more than getting a textbook assigned by a professor that the professor wrote himself, and it's going to be $400 for it. And so those are also things we need to fight for. Housing is something that is really dear to me. I did 2 years of work in eviction defense, representing working families against their slumlords. I organized tenant unions, I organized rent strikes, and so housing policy is something I really care about. You've already heard me talk a little bit earlier about my plan to make housing affordable for students, which is divesting all the money that we're spending on things that don't match our California values and instead investing it in students here. Some other things I think we need to do to fight for more affordable housing is, number one, I think we do need to build more housing but it cannot be the housing that real estate developers want to build, because all they end up building are luxury condos that take up the space of 4 affordable units, and they charge $3,000 a month on rent, which is not affordable. So we need to build more affordable housing. We need to protect tenants better. In California, we have what's called a no-fault eviction, which means you could have always followed your lease. You could have always paid your rent on time, and you can still be evicted. I don't think that's fair. And then lastly, and this is one that I find a lot of elected officials neglect talking about, is we need to take on these corporate landlords who are buying up so much homes. Last quarter, 1/3 of every home sold in the country was bought by an investor landlord. These are not folks who are trying to live in them, they are trying to invest to make money on them. And for the young people in this room, for the working people in this room, we are never gonna be able to compete against $1 billion private equity company when it comes to housing. And so they are pumping these billions of dollars of investment money into the market and driving up the cost for regular people. And so what I support is fighting these corporate landlords so that homes are for people to live in and not for these private companies to invest in.
Thank you, Oliver. Michael?
Well, first, congratulations. I'm sure your parents are so proud of the fact that you worked hard and now are going to some of the best conservatories in the country, so congratulations to you. And I would say what you shared in terms of being told that you have to work hard because there's not money for you to go to college is sadly not unique just to you or to me or to Jimmy. It's a California story, just given how unaffordable California is. And that story is at the heart of why I started the Stop the Scholars Program and figured out how do we give students an extra $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a year, because we knew that was a gap that folks had between it being tuition free and being able to afford books or food or shelter. And that's why as Lieutenant Governor, in addition to ensuring that the UC, CSU, community colleges do their job in terms of building the housing that students deserve and workers, it's also about figuring out how do we raise revenue to provide more funding for our higher education system. That's why I spoke earlier about the need to overhaul our master plan for higher education and to find a revenue source so that every year there's a line item in the state budget about what public higher education will be. But I think housing has to be factored into the expected overall cost, because that's like what's driving a lot of those costs. Number two, there's other things we can do, like linking the CalFresh application to financial aid applications. Sad that so many of our young people are hungry or food insecure, but it's even sadder that there's a solution that can help with that. That's literally putting a button, a check mark on the applications, that we haven't done so yet. So I think as Lieutenant Governor, a big part of the job will be also to look at what are some of the things we can do to lower the cost. That may not be a big expenditure, that may not be something sexy or splashy, but matters for a young person to have food to eat, somewhere to sleep, and access to textbooks so they're able to complete their 4-year degree on time. And then lastly, that's why I think it's also important to continue to work to get rid of remedial classes, so that when folks are on 4-year paths or on a 4-year path, that's why it's important to expand course access, so folks aren't spending 4, 5, 6, 7 years to get a 4-year degree. So all those things are at the heart of why I'm running, and I'll think of you and in your story, your inspiration as we make those changes so that everyone has the same opportunities that you have.
So next we're going to hear from an equally remarkable student, Coy Sadie. Coy is a first-generation graduating senior at Cal State LA, pursuing a degree in engineering. What's remarkable is she is both a student and a parenting student. She offers a unique perspective and is currently serving as the ASI college representative for the College of Engineering, Computer Science, and Technology, where she represents more than 3,000 students.
Hi everyone. So my question to the both of you is, as a student parent, I am in school to build a better future for my family. So serving as Lieutenant Governor, how will you work with higher education and workforce partners to ensure that the degrees and credentials we earn in college would lead to good paying jobs, meaningful career pathways, and to a stronger pipeline to success and to secure employment after graduation in California?
How's your child?
She's gonna be 16 in July.
16.
Yes, sir.
Send me your skincare routine. Well, first of all, congratulations. That's incredible. And I would say, before I answer your question, I think for student parents in particular, the CSU community college system has to also buffer or increase their childcare options. Maybe not for 16-year-olds, but at least for babies, right? And not just for students, but also for workers. You know, there's also a lot of workers on these campuses that have young children, and childcare is expensive in the state. In terms of your question, we have to do a better job of real partnerships with industry, because it makes no sense for us to continue to brag about California being the 4th largest economy in the world. And our brilliant students who took out some debt, who took a lot of 5-hour interviews where folks taking out the stand with up, are struggling to find jobs after completing their degrees from some of the best institutions in the world. And a lot is a partnerships issue. A lot is a linkages issue. So when we talked about earlier, the sort of K through 12, higher education, pre-K consortium, and my big priority being workforce development partnerships, that's the name of the game, because we have employers here. We have industry here. We have need here. And what needs to happen is the connecting the dots and the matchmaking, and that's something the Lieutenant Governor can do. By being very annoying, by calling people and showing up and bragging and convening. People like going to meetings for some reason, so it's convening a bunch of meetings in different sectors. Like here's the aerospace, like there's a bunch of things we can do, but the key is to develop real partnerships and pipelines and pathways, so that when a young person from CSU LA graduates, there's a clear pathway to jobs in LA County. When a person from UC Berkeley graduates, there's clear, like just making the pathways clearer, the jobs exist, the talent is there, and the gap is a leadership one, which is what I hope to fill as Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Michael. Oliver?
Thank you for the question, and congrats on all of your organizing. So, for our public education system, I think there is increasingly a disconnect between education and then getting jobs. And for me, there's several reasons these things are happening. A big one is AI. I am an AI hater. And the reason I hate it is because we're sold this promise that AI is supposed to make everything so great, so much more efficient and so much faster. And I have not seen that reflected in lowering the cost of my healthcare, lowering the cost of housing, making life actually better for people. What I do see is AI being fed into algorithms in the housing market to make sure these landlords know exactly how much to squeeze each person. What I do see is ICE using AIs in heat-seeking thermal drone so they can find people who are hiding. And what I also do see is AI replacing a lot of students and a lot of workers who are desperately looking for a job after they graduate. One of my labor organizer mentors said a line that has always stuck with me, which is, they can never take away our power of labor. That is the power we will always have to fight for justice. But AI is coming in and taking that. And so I think we need to focus our state away from all the BS that's coming down from tech and from Silicon Valley about how AI is supposed to make all of our lives better, and actually focus our state policy on training young leaders, making sure there are jobs available for regular people. Another big part is refocusing on some of the things that we spend our money on. Just a quick show of hands, how many people here, especially for students, how many people here want to work for ICE after they graduate? How many people want to work for LAPD? Well, these are the entities that are taking up billions and billions of our dollars every single year. And we see that as they're taking up billions and billions of our dollars, and we're not putting resources into the things our community actually needs, then things get worse, and then they use that as leverage to get more and more of our money. There's no reason ICE thugs who are tearing families apart should be getting 50,000 signing on bonuses when we're not giving that to our nurses, our social workers, and our teachers. And so what I think we really need in the state of California is to refocus our state spending away from these industries, many of which donate to our politicians, and into the things Californians actually need, things like healthcare, things like housing, things like education.
Thank you. So we're now going to hear from Jeffrey Umana Munoz, who's a graduate student at CSU LA, pursuing his master's degree in Latin American Studies. As an undocumented student organizer, Jeffrey has bravely focused on addressing student access and retention needs through an intersectional, inclusive, and student-centered approach that revolves around creating a welcoming environment with a laser focus on equity.
Thanks so much. My question for you both today is, many California students and families are concerned about the impacts of increased federal immigration enforcement, as well as limited access to work opportunities for undocumented students. If elected Lieutenant Governor, how would you protect communities like mine from disruption while advancing policies that expand economic stability and work opportunities for undocumented students, like the Opportunity for All proposal?
And we're going to start with Oliver.
Thank you also for all the organizing that you've done. I know it is especially challenging since the last 2 years. This question reminds me of one of my clients. I met him about a year ago in an immigration detention center, and he had lived in the US for many years. He has 4 young kids, always worked very diligently, and now he is in one of these immigration detention centers. And to stay in touch with his kids, they charge him to make phone calls, $5 per phone call. And the way he makes the money to make these phone calls is he works. For a full day of work in these for-profit ICE prisons, they pay him $1. And it's the same deal, the same system at every single one of these for-profit ICE prisons that we have in our state. 8 different for-profit ICE prisons. Everyone inside is working for $1 a day to stay in touch with their families. And that is important to name, because that is the reason these raids are happening. That is the reason why our immigrant communities are under attack. That is the reason why we need to organize for our immigrant families, because these companies are making a killing tearing families apart. And so there's a lot that our public education system can do. One thing that I have worked on throughout my work at the ACLU is making sure campuses have designated safe, closed spaces that ICE would need a warrant to access, because a lot of spaces on campus are public where ICE can just come on, but if you make these safe spaces for immigrant students, then they'll be a lot safer. Number 2 is getting our school boards to actually protect the students that make up their student body, right? Our UCs, for example, have a habit of cracking down on students who speak up and exercise their rights of free speech. And when the Trump administration comes and says, we're gonna freeze your funding unless you give us control and you give us names, then that's when our school systems actually stop fighting and they turn over everything and they work with the Trump administration. So what I really wanna fight for is to make sure our school boards do not collaborate with the Trump administration. Some other things that will make a real difference is shutting down these for-profit ICE prisons and then funding our statewide rapid response networks. I'm a volunteer with the Kern County Rapid Response Network. We have trained more than 400 volunteers since Trump took office, and that has allowed us to respond to raids within 15 minutes. That has allowed us to deliver food to thousands of families who've been afraid to go outside. And we need to be funding those things, not more cops, not more ICE thugs.
Michael?
Well, congratulations on all you've accomplished, and again, thank you for your leadership and the very serious risks you're taking. So appreciate it and see that. In terms of your question, as Lieutenant Governor, I plan to be a vocal co-sponsor, testify in support of the Opportunity for All legislation you mentioned. And essentially what that is that right now, if you're an undocumented student, you can't get a student job, which is ridiculous given how expensive A, university is, B, California is, and C, how immigrant communities are under attack and folks aren't able to get to work. So that'd be top of mind, top priority, and already been active in that fight and continue to want to do so. Number 2, as Lieutenant Governor, I think it's important to make sure that we continue to fund our Dream Centers and all the support services on campus we have for Dreamer and other immigrant students. Number 3, as Lieutenant Governor, I think it's also important to say no ICE on campus means no ICE on campus. I can't believe I was at a CSU trustee meeting and some of the young people there told me that ICE was tabling at a career fair at one of the campuses. It's completely unacceptable. So as a regent, whether it's a resolution, whether it's a formal vote, just make it very clear. We say no ICE on campus, that includes tabling, that includes any activity within our legal limits. And then I'll also say, as I did mention it before, but Stockton, California is 1/3 foreign-born. When I was mayor of Stockton, we were ranked the most diverse city in this country. And I spent 4 years as mayor during the Trump administration, including spending my entire first year arguing with Jeff Sessions, who was then Attorney General, who threatened to take away my COPS funding, who threatened to take away all type of things because of the clear sanctuary city stance we took in a red county. And I say this because I've gotten toe-to-toe with the Trump administration, particularly the issue of immigration. I've had our city attorney file lawsuits, and I think that's important because, as Oliver mentioned, part of this comes with a risk of retaliation from the federal government. Part of it comes with threats, but those threats or retaliation are second to the rights of all people in California, including California citizens who may not have U.S. documentation, to have access to jobs, to have access to education, and to have access to walk their campuses and their neighborhoods without fear. So with me, you have a champion who has fought against this administration, particularly on this issue, and brings there's no compromise, there's no gray area, there's no deal to be cut. That particularly as a region on the UCCSU community college boards, those students on those campuses are our students. They deserve access that everyone else gets, and they deserve to be safe. And as Lieutenant Governor, it'll be my job to make sure the university continues to take those stances.
Thank you, Michael. So we now have our final student question, and this question is delivered by Julie Hernandez. Julie graduated from Cal State LA in December of 2025 and has been deeply engaged in student advocacy work through the Pat Brown Institute, where she's helped develop and lead programs both serving students and the broader community. Her education spans Cal State LA, CSU Bakersfield, and LA Trade Tech, giving her multiple unique student perspectives. As someone who's navigated real challenges, including housing instability and caretaking, Julie brings lived experience and a deep commitment to change.
Hello. Given your role in overseeing and shaping higher education policy through appointments and advocacy, I'd like to ask the following question. California's higher education system is often seen as a pathway to upward mobility, but outcomes vary widely by income, race, and geography. How would you use the Lieutenant Governor's platform and appointments to push the system towards more equitable results?
And we're going to start with Oliver on this.
Yeah, thank you for the question. You are an overachiever. Yes, so I think the cost of our public education system is a huge factor and it explains so much of that discrepancy, right? When students are living out of their cars, when they're living out of their attics, when they have to visit food pantries, when they're working 2 jobs, then they're not focused as much on studying. And so making our public education system affordable, that is my #1 priority with our school systems. I think that, of course, as I've said earlier, means refocusing away from some of the things that don't match California values and actually investing them into our students. That also means taking on some of these corporate landlords who are not paying their fair share into our public education system. And then that also means investing in job channels, making sure that students who are graduating, they have a lot of job opportunities compared to what they have now. I think that's going to take, again, refocusing and making sure our state's priorities are going towards the things our state actually needs instead of just to the industries that are donating to our political class. So those are some of the really big ones. I think also, when it comes to making sure there's enough opportunities, it also takes making sure students feel safe. They can have a lot of free speech opportunities on campus. So much of the value that we get out of our public education system is the ability to do the free exchange of ideas. And we have not seen that to be the case on a lot of these campuses in the last 2 years. Students who just want to speak up for what they believe in, professors who want to speak up for what they believe in, are being targeted by a lot of these systems. And so instead of doing that, I think we need to protect students, protect free speech, and stand up to the Trump administration. Don't stand up to students, don't bring your hammer down on students, but stand up to the Trump administration and ICE and all of these bad forces that are tearing California apart.
Thank you, Oliver. Michael?
I know I've asked this a lot, but I really do have ADHD, so could you please repeat the questions? And when I go first, I get it, but if I have to go second, I'm distracted. Sorry.
It's fine, I'll just speak it. Given your role in overseeing and shaping higher education policy through appointments and advocacy, I'd like to ask the following question. California's higher education system is often seen as a pathway to upward mobility, but outcomes vary widely by income, race, and geography. How would you use the Lieutenant Governor's platform and appointments to push the system toward more equitable results?
Thank you. I mentioned this question in two ways. Number one, in terms of what the system itself can do, I really struggle with all this data we have that we like to talk about, like who's doing bad and who's not performing, but less of a conversation of what they need to do well. So I think it's making the data actionable and investing in all the things we know that works for students supporting completion. So no disrespect to maybe some folks in here, but I think the UCCSU community college system have to do a better job in terms of not investing in administrative blow, but investing in things that we know are important for student success, which isn't another like high-level administrator oftentimes, but it is another counselor. It is another mentor. It is funding community centers and places where people go for community. Number two, I think we also have to have a conversation about how the folks who are not doing well in terms of completing our university systems also aren't doing well in our K-12 systems, also aren't doing well in the health out. Like, it's the same groups and everything, right? And I think part of the conversation has to be how we use the data at the university system to inform what has to happen outside of the university. And that's a state with a real opportunity for all, a state that has real, a chance for everyone in the state to actually make it. So as Lieutenant Governor, part of the role is talking about what experience are these students who aren't doing well bringing with them to the campus, like poverty, like trauma, like what regions of the state, Central Valley, where I'm from, Inland Empire. Like it's not a mystery. The same places that are struggling on literacy and unemployment and poverty are the same places whose students probably aren't doing well in our university system without looking at no data here, just from common sense and vice versa. So I think, Ed, the university has a role to play in terms of investing in what we know works for student success, wraparound care, funding communities, and there's more folks doing hand-to-hand combat with students as they navigate the system, making it easy for folks to access, making it affordable so people can afford to live on campus, making it easy so folks have access to food so they're not hungry studying, but then also having a larger conversation about who do we want the state to work for? Who do we want the state to be? The fourth largest economy for who? And then as Lieutenant Governor, championing all the things we have to do outside the system, through the legislative process, to ensure that we have a state that's really golden with opportunity for all people. And that's why, again, I'm so excited about running. So I think the Lieutenant Governor has a unique position to use what we see in the higher education system as a mirror for what's not happening outside the system. Because college is important, but college isn't the only solve for poverty, particularly at scale. Like college is important, but college isn't the only solve for trauma and for unaffordability. That's okay.
You'll get a chance.
Yeah, I got my closing remarks, I know.
Closing remarks. So can we just pause and give these incredible students another round? Thank you for having the courage of your voice, sharing your experience, and asking some really strong questions. Before we open it up to our last few minutes for candidate closing remarks, as I shared earlier, we gave all candidates an opportunity to record a video if they were unable to attend today. State Treasurer Fiona Ma was unable to participate today as she is traveling, but she did record a video, so we're going to show her quick video, and then we are going to conclude with remarks from each of the wonderful candidates we've just heard from.
Hi, I'm Fiona Ma, California State Treasurer, and I'm running for Lieutenant Governor this June 2nd. I'm the oldest child of immigrant parents. When my parents got married, they had just $3,000, but they believed in opportunity, and so do I. My mother was a substitute teacher, then a public school art teacher for 20 years, so I know the power of education. I went to public schools, and I know it's the pathway to success. But today, college is just too expensive, and that has to change. As your Lieutenant Governor, I'll work to stabilize tuition and make college more affordable, expand Cal Grants and financial aid, and build more student housing so no student has to commute hours or sleep in their car. Because the California dream should be affordable, accessible, and achievable for everyone. Let's get this done together. Thank you all.
Thank you. So now we're going to have a chance to hear closing remarks from our two candidates. And I just want to thank you for the incredibly respectful and insightful discourse, both incorporating your lived experiences, but your hopes and dreams centered in the students of today in California. We're going to start with Oliver, and then we will end with Michael. You have 2 minutes each.
Yeah, thanks everyone for having us. I know it's a lot of work to get this together. It was a flawless event, very easy to get here, super well organized. I love the student questions. We're running a very unique campaign in that we're not taking any corporate PAC money, and that has served us very well. We are now at 5,000 volunteers with the campaign. This past weekend, we had 24 canvases all across the state. And it would be easy to go to some of these donors and say, give us $100,000 and we'll do your bidding. Because that's how it ends up. If you're taking $100,000 from a PAC, then you're gonna pick up when they call. But that's not how we wanna run things. A lot of these systems that we talked about today, ICE, the corporate landlords, making California more affordable, it's going to take more than one candidate. It's going to take more than one election. It's going to take more than one campaign. These are structures that are very, very entrenched. And what really excites me about this campaign is building power. We have the support of the United Auto Workers, who represent so much of our educators and also of the Democratic Socialists of America. And it is with these partners that we want to build the California of our dreams. The core of this campaign is about overthrowing a lot of these corporate influences and their political puppets and building a California that we all can believe in, that works for the people who build this state. A California where immigrant families are safe. A California where healthcare is free. A California where housing is affordable. A California where our public education system can build our next generation of leaders. And if that sounds like the California of your dreams too, then I hope you support our campaign. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oliver.
So before I go into my closing remarks, because the timer's not even running, I want to respond to the last question and say there's pockets of excellence where there's students are achieving in the system. So again, it's about scaling those up. But in terms of closing remarks, again, Michael Tubbs, I'm running for Lieutenant Governor, and running because, as I mentioned in my last answer, we keep talking about California as the 4th largest economy in the world, but the question is the 4th largest economy for who? I've been up and down the state for the past 2 years, whether I'm in Bakersfield, or Los Angeles, or San Jose, or my hometown of Stockton. The vast majority of people don't understand why they're paying so much for housing, why they're paying so much for taxes, why they're paying so much just to afford to live, and all this wealth is being generated. And I submit to you, it's a leadership question. It's a question of priorities. It's a question of who's willing to go to the mat and fight, who's willing to make some enemies, who's willing to have some conflict to build a state where you, your family, your children can afford to live. And I'm that guy, and not just because I've said it, I've done it. I was being mayor in a very purple city, in a red county, with Trump as president, where we did guaranteed income, where we reduced homicides, where we balanced budgets, where we provide scholarships for people, where we did things that people thought were impossible. And it wasn't easy. It took a lot of work, a lot of consensus building, but it's possible. And I do believe that everyone in here, and as equally important, the 40 million plus people who aren't in here, deserve a leader as Lieutenant Governor who sees them and their families. And I think that's why I've been endorsed by SEIU California, by the United Domestic Workers, by AFSCME California, by all the major housing groups in the state, by leaders here like Holly Mitchell and Lindsay Horvath, by folks like Latifah Simon and Robert Garcia and Sam Liccardo, by leaders who are working to build a California worthy of you. You know, it would say that we know that MAGA's bad, we know that Donald Trump is abhorrent, but what's more important is if we don't have an alternative. And California can't be that alternative but it can't be that alternative with the highest poverty rate. It can't be that alternative with no one can afford healthcare or childcare. And it can't be that alternative with leadership who just talks and doesn't do. So if you're looking for leaders who are not afraid to have a good fight, who aren't afraid to push the boundaries, who aren't afraid to try new things, who aren't afraid to make sure we're as good in action as we are good in our rhetoric, then please, please, please vote for me on June 2nd. I could really, really appreciate your support.
Thank you. So I want to close by again thanking both Cal State LA and the Pat Brown Institute for opening up their home to us today to have this rich and constructive conversation. I was reminded recently by one of our board members that you can never miss a crisis as an opportunity to do what's right. If we come to today with the premise that irrespective of what's happening at the federal level, our systems are inequitable by design, and they have not been serving the students that we heard from today, the students that are necessary to meet the California of tomorrow. And so what are we going to do together to harness this position, to harness our collective power, to make that kind of transformational student-centered change? You see up there on the candidate engagement for the Alliance for Candidate Engagement in Education, we have ways to get involved. Please scan the QR code. You have position papers on each of the key focal areas that we talked about today. Visit us at collegecampaign.org to learn more about the work that we are doing at the Campaign for College Opportunity. And in addition to, again, thanking the Alliance for Candidate Engagement in Education and the wonderful candidates who came out who are fighting extremely hard, win or lose, to ensure that they are demanding that students have a voice and that this position is seen as critical to the future of California. Let's give them one more round of applause. Finally, because we could not do this without our local partners, one of my favorite quotes, you want to go fast, go alone, go slow, but go together, right? And then really we see an ability to arrive at that destination. I want to thank our amazing partners of 20 years. They'll be celebrating their 20-year anniversary in a few weeks. SoCal CAN, so let's give them a round of applause. The United Way of Greater Los Angeles. Unite LA, a huge partner with us on affordability issues. The UCLA Latino Policy Institute. And our wonderful partners at Alliance for a Better Community. Thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. I hope you'll walk away today and talk with your network, talk with your families, talk with your colleagues about why the Lieutenant Governor is an overlooked position that probably has some of the greatest power to leverage student-centered transformation in California. Let's ensure we get one of these incredible candidates elected, and let's ensure that we use that to compel transformation in the way that will truly center equity and economic justice in higher education for decades to come.
Thank you very much, everyone.
We'd love to take a picture with our partners on the stage, our students too.